CRT Class 9th History Chapter 1 The French Revolution. The French Revolution is a landmark in the history of Europe and the world. It ended the monarchical system in France. The slogan of French Revolution, liberty, freedom, and equality, became important ideas of the new era. French society during the late 18th century. In 1774, 20-year-old Louis XVI of Bourbon family became the King of France. He was married to the Austrian princess Marie Antoinette. Due to long years of war and maintenance of an extravagant court at the place of Versailles, he got an empty treasury. Louis XVI also helped 13 American colonies to gain their independence from Britain. The war added more than 1 billion livres to the debt of more than 2 billion livres. Then the lenders began to charge an interest of 10% on loans. To meet the expenses like maintain an army, court, etc., the state was forced to increase the taxes. But this measure was not sufficient as only members of the third estate paid taxes. The three estates of France at that time were: first estate, the clergy. Clergies were the group of persons invested with special functions in the church. They enjoyed certain privileges by birth, like exemption from paying taxes to the state. Further, the church levied a tax called tithe from the peasants, which comprised of one-tenth of the agricultural produce. Second estate, the nobility. It consisted of rich, aristocrat people of the state. They also enjoyed the privilege of exemption from paying taxes to the state. They also enjoyed feudal privileges, that is, feudal dues, which they extracted from the peasants. The third estate consisted of the rest of the population, that is, businessmen, merchants, court officials, lawyers, peasants, artisans, landless labor, etc. They had no privilege, they had to pay direct taxes called taille to the state, as well as a number of indirect taxes levied on articles of everyday consumption like salt, tobacco, etc. Peasants made up about 90% of the population of France. The struggle to survive. During 1715 to 1789, the population of France increased rapidly, which led to rapid increase in demand for food grains. Insufficient production increased the price of bread, but the wages of the workers did not keep pace with the rise in prices. Situation became worse when bad weather conditions reduced the harvest. This condition created this condition created a subsistence crisis. Emergence of the middle class. In the 18th century, a new social group emerged who were known as the middle class. They had become rich by expanding of overseas trade and manufacturing goods. In addition to merchants and manufacturers, there were lawyers and administrative officials who were educated. They believed that no group of society should be privileged by birth. Philosophers like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Montesquieu considered the middle class was sole responsible for revolution. They spread the ideas of freedom, equal laws, and opportunities for all. Ideas of philosophers. John Locke, in his two treatises of government, criticized the concept of divine and absolute right of the monarch. Rousseau, in his The Social Contract, proposed the form of the government based on social contract between people and the representatives. Montesquieu, in his The Spirit of the Laws, stressed the concept of separation of powers between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. His concept of separation of powers was a great instrument against the despotic autocratic rule of the French emperor. The American Constitution and its guarantee of individual rights was an important example for political thinkers of France. These ideas were spread among the people through books and newspapers. With the news that Louis XVI is planning to impose more taxes to meet the expenses of the state, it generated anger and protest against the system of privileges among the people. The outbreak of the revolution. On 5th May 1789, Louis XVI called for an assembly of the Estates General to pass the proposal for new taxes. First, second, and third estates sent their representatives. The first and second estates sent 300 representatives each, who were seated in rows facing each other on two sides. The third estate was represented by its more prosperous and educated members but they faced discrimination and had to stand at the back. Peasants, artisans, and women were denied entry to the assembly, but they sent their demands and grievances through representatives. The members of the Third Estate demanded that voting should be conducted by taking the assembly as a whole. But the king rejected this proposal, and members of the Third Estate walked out of the assembly in protest. National Assembly of the Third Estate. On 20th June 1789, the representatives of the Third Estate assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in Versailles. They declared themselves as a National Assembly. They also swore to draft a new constitution for France that would limit the powers of the monarch. The representatives of the Third Estate were led by Mirabeau and Abbesius. Mirabeau was born in a noble family but discarded his feudal privileges. Abbesius was originally a priest. He also wrote an influential pamphlet called What is the Third Estate? The revolt starts at the Bastille. Due to severe winter, the harvest was affected in France, which led to the increase in prices of essential commodities. After spending hours in long queues at the bakery, crowds of angry women raided the shops. On 14 July 1789, an agitated crowd destroyed the Bastille. The Bastille was hated by all French people as it symbolized the dominating power of the king. In the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that the lords of the manor had hired bands of brigands to destroy the ripe crops. Hearing this rumor, peasants attacked chateaux in many areas of France. The peasants looted hoarded grain and burned documents containing records of manorial dues. Due to all this, a large number of nobles moved to neighboring countries. End of special privileges. Seeing the power of the revolt, Louis XVI recognized the proposal of the National Assembly that his powers would be checked by a constitution. On the night of 4th August 1789, France passed the law for abolishing the feudal system of obligations and taxes. The members of clergy were also forced to give their privileges. Tithes were abolished and lands owned by the church were seized by authority. By this, the government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion livres. France becomes a constitutional monarchy. The National Assembly completed the draft of the constitution in 1791. Its main objective was to limit the powers of the monarch. Now the powers were separated and assigned to different institutions like the legislature, executive, and judiciary. This change of powers made France a constitutional monarchy. The laws made by the National Assembly. Under the new constitution, the laws were to be made by the National Assembly. The Assembly was indirectly elected, that is, active citizens voted for a group of electors who in turn chose the Assembly members. The highlights of the changed system were men who were above the age of 25 years and paid taxes equal to at least 3 days of a laborer's wage were given the status of active citizens, that is, they had the right to vote. The remaining men and all women were classified as passive citizens. To qualify as an elector and then as a member of the assembly, a man had to belong to the highest bracket of taxpayers. The constitution began with a declaration of the rights of man and citizen, such as the right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, and equality before law. These were established as natural rights, and it was the duty of the state to protect these. France abolishes monarchy and becomes a republic. Rulers of France's neighboring countries were worried by the developments in France. They made plans to send troops to put down the events taking place since 1789. Before this could happen, the National Assembly declared war against Prussia and Austria in April 1792. Thousands of volunteers joined the army. Among the patriotic songs sung by them was the Marseillaise, composed by the poet Roger de Lisle. It later became the national anthem of France. It was sung for the first time by volunteers from Marseilles as they marched into Paris. While men were busy fighting at the front, women had to earn a living and look after their families. A large segment of the population was convinced to carry the revolution further, as the Constitution of 1791 gave political rights only to the richer section.